The church smelled of lilies and varnished wood, the air thick with tension and curiosity. Sunlight streamed through tall stained glass windows, painting the pews in fractured color. People from the whole county had come, farmers, widows, tradesmen, and their gossiping wives, all packed shoulder to shoulder for what the mayor called the renewal gathering, but everyone else whispered the truth: it was a bride auction. Eleanor Grace stood near the altar, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers that trembled slightly in her hands. She had gathered them that morning, dew still on their petals. She had worn her mother's wedding dress, a simple ivory gown that had yellowed faintly with age. It fit her well, though she knew the lace couldn't hide the lines that time had etched across her face. 41 years old, widowed, with a child, those words had followed her like a shadow. She kept her chin up, her posture calm and composed. If there was one thing life had taught her, it was that dignity was something no one could take unless she handed it over herself. But still, the whispers crawled through the room. Poor thing, she's still trying. She looks good for her age, but that's not what men come for. Does she really think someone will claim her? Each word landed like a pebble on her heart. She didn't flinch, though her fingers gripped the bouquet tighter. Behind her, her daughter Lily sat in the last pew, swinging her legs. The little girl's curls framed her face like soft clouds, and she held her ragged doll close. She didn't understand what was happening, not really. Her mama had said only, "We're going to church, sweetheart. Maybe today, something good will happen." The pastor, a kind man with sad eyes, cleared his throat and called the names one by one. Young women stepped forward, some nervous, some giddy, each quickly chosen by men who had been waiting. The crowd clapped politely after each match, as if it were a performance instead of lives being rearranged. When Eleanor's name was called, the room grew quieter than before. She stepped forward, the soft swish of her dress barely audible. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her expression didn't betray it. She stood beneath the cross at the altar, looking out over the crowd. She saw men she'd known since childhood, men she'd cooked for during harvest feasts, men whose wives had passed, men who used to nod politely to her in the market. None met her eyes now. The pastor smiled thinly, his voice carrying an uneasy hope. Miss Eleanor Grace, widow of the late Henry Grace, mother of one child. A woman of good character and skill, well known in this community. No one spoke. The silence pressed against her ears. She felt every second stretch like a wire pulled too tight. "She's too old," someone whispered. "I heard her farm barely gets by. She should just stay single, God bless her." The pastor shifted awkwardly, glancing between Eleanor and the audience. "Is there anyone willing to take Miss Grace's hand today?" Nothing. A chair creaked somewhere in the back. Someone coughed. The ticking of the clock above the door sounded louder than before. Eleanor's throat tightened. Her cheeks burned though she kept her head high. She told herself it didn't matter. She had her daughter. She had her farm. She had her strength. But still, the rejection, so open and public, cut deeper than she'd expected. Then something small dropped to the floor behind her, a soft thud. Everyone turned. It was Lily's doll. The little girl bent to pick it up but paused, her wide eyes sweeping the silent crowd. Her tiny hand clutched the wooden pew, and her voice, thin but brave, broke through the silence. "That's her," she said, pointing with her little finger. "That's my mama." The words hung in the air, pure and unfiltered. People turned to look at her, startled. A few smiled awkwardly, others shifted in guilt. Eleanor froze, her heart twisting. Lily straightened, standing on the bench so everyone could see her. "If nobody wants her, you're all silly. My mama's the best. She makes pies better than anyone, and she sings when it rains, and she helps everyone even when she's tired." A ripple of laughter moved through the room, not mocking, but soft and startled, the kind that breaks tension. The pastor smiled gently. Eleanor wanted to scoop Lily up and hush her, but her feet wouldn't move. And then, from the very back of the church, a man rose. He was tall, with sun-worn skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His hat hung loosely in his hand, dust clinging to his boots. Samuel Hart, the rancher from the far side of the valley. He rarely came to town except for supplies and church on holidays. All eyes turned as he walked down the aisle, his steps slow but sure. Eleanor's heart stuttered. She didn't know him well, only by sight, by the quiet way he carried himself when he rode through the market. He stopped in front of her. The church was silent again, but this silence was different, expectant. "I'll claim her," he said. His voice was low, calm, but it carried through every corner of the room. The pastor blinked, startled. "You're sure, Mr. Hart?" Samuel nodded once. "I've heard enough today to know what kind of woman she is. Any mother who raises a daughter brave enough to speak truth like that, she's worth standing beside." A hush fell again, deeper now, but this time it was mixed with awe. Eleanor stared at him, hardly believing what she'd heard. "You don't even know me," she whispered. He met her gaze evenly. "I reckon I'd like to." The pastor cleared his throat, flustered but smiling. "Then by God's grace, we have a match." Applause broke out, timid at first, then stronger, a murmur of approval that filled the church like sunlight. Eleanor didn't move. It felt unreal, like she'd stepped out of her own story. Samuel turned toward her, offering his hand. She hesitated only a second before placing hers in his. His hand was warm, rough with years of labor, but steady. He didn't grip her out of possession, only respect. From behind them came Lily's joyful voice, loud and triumphant, "See, Mama. I told you someone would want you." The crowd laughed softly again. Eleanor smiled through tears she couldn't stop now, her heart overflowing. She looked at Samuel, this stranger who had seen her when no one else would, and for the first time in a long, long while, she felt visible. As the church bell rang to close the ceremony, Samuel bent down and said to Lily, "Looks like you found your mama a new friend." Lily giggled and shook her head. "No, mister. I found my mama a hero." Eleanor pressed her hand to her heart, watching the two of them together, the weathered rancher and the little girl who had changed everything with a few brave words. When they stepped out into the sunlight, the world felt different. The wind smelled sweeter, the air lighter, and as the crowd dispersed behind them, Eleanor Grace realized that sometimes, miracles didn't arrive in the shape of lightning or angels. Sometimes, they came in the voice of a child who believed her mother was worth the whole world. The wagon rattled softly down the dirt road, the horses' steady hooves striking a slow rhythm that seemed to echo through the open evening. The sun had begun to sink behind the hills, painting the sky in long strokes of orange and violet. Eleanor sat beside Samuel, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her thoughts swirling as the distance grew between them and the church. Lily sat in the middle, holding her doll and humming under her breath, blissfully unaware of the turmoil in her mother's chest. Every now and then she would glance up at Samuel, then at Eleanor, as if trying to understand this new picture her world was forming into. Eleanor's heart hadn't stopped pounding since they'd stepped out of the church. The applause, the whispers, the looks of surprise, all of it still lingered in her ears. She couldn't tell whether she should feel grateful, confused, or afraid. A man had claimed her, yes, but not in the way the world used that word. There had been no greed or pity in Samuel Hart's eyes, only something quiet and steady that unsettled her more than cruelty ever could, sincerity. "You don't have to do this," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Whatever happened back there, I don't want you feeling like you owe me anything." Samuel kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Didn't do it because I owed you," he said simply. "Did it because it felt right." She frowned slightly. "You don't even know me." He nodded. "No. But I saw enough. That's more than most men need." Eleanor looked away, the wind brushing against her face. His words shouldn't have made her chest tighten the way they did. After a few minutes, Lily piped up in her small, eager voice. "Mr. Hart, do you have cows?" Samuel glanced down at her and smiled faintly. "A few. Some horses too." "You like animals." "I love horses," she said quickly. "Mama says I can't ride one yet, but I'm brave. I can try." He chuckled, a sound deep and warm. "I don't doubt that, little lady. But maybe we start with feeding them first." Eleanor couldn't help the soft smile tugging at her lips as she listened to them. It had been months since she'd heard Lily speak with so much joy. Usually, her daughter's voice carried questions she didn't know how to answer. Why did Daddy leave? Why are people mean? Why are you sad? But now she was laughing, her curls bouncing in the light. They rode for nearly an hour before the landscape began to change. The fields opened into wide pastures, and in the distance, the outline of a ranch appeared against the sky. It wasn't grand, but it was solid, white fences, a sturdy barn, a wide porch that looked out toward the valley. Smoke curled lazily from a chimney. "That's it," Samuel said quietly. "Home." Lily gasped. It's so big. Eleanor's throat tightened again, though this time not from fear. It's beautiful, she said softly. When the wagon stopped, Samuel climbed down and offered his hand to Eleanor. She hesitated only for a second before taking it. His palm was rough and warm, steadying her as she stepped down. For a fleeting moment, she met his gaze. There was something there, gentle, respectful, and real. She looked away before she could drown in it. He lifted Lily down next, setting her carefully on her feet. There you go, Miss Brave. The horses are out back. You'll meet them soon. Lily grinned, clutching her doll. Can I name one? You can try, he said, smiling. But they've got some stubborn names already. Eleanor followed as Samuel led them up the porch steps and into the house. The door creaked softly, and warmth spilled out, firelight flickering against wooden walls, the smell of pine and faint smoke in the air. The place was simple, but it had the feeling of something built by hand, piece by piece, with care. Lily ran ahead, exploring every corner, her laughter echoing down the hallway. Eleanor stood just inside the doorway, taking it all in. It had been years since she'd walked into a home that didn't feel empty. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, Samuel said quietly from behind her. She turned. Neither was I. He smiled faintly. There's a room for Lily down that hall. Yours is upstairs, faces east. The morning light comes in early, you like it. Her fingers brushed the edge of her shawl. You didn't have to prepare all this. He shrugged lightly. Didn't prepare it for anyone in particular. But it's good to know it'll finally be used. Lily appeared then, clutching a carved wooden horse she'd found on a shelf. Mama, look what I found. Eleanor smiled. It's lovely, sweetheart. Be careful not to break it. Samuel chuckled. She can keep it. Made it years ago and never knew who it was for. Guess now I do. After supper, simple bread, stew, and warm milk, Lily fell asleep almost instantly in the small bed near the fire. Eleanor covered her gently with a blanket, brushing a curl from her forehead. For a long moment, she just watched her breathe, her small chest rising and falling in peace she hadn't known for too long. When she turned, Samuel was standing at the open door, a lantern in his hand. Come outside, he said softly. You'll want to see the sky tonight. She followed him out to the porch. The night air was cool, the stars spread wide and brilliant across the dark canvas. The land stretched in every direction, silent except for the distant murmur of crickets. Eleanor leaned against the railing, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. I'd forgotten it could be this quiet. Samuel stood beside her, his presence calm and solid. Quiet's good for healing, he said. She looked down at her hands, the rough edges of work still visible on her fingers. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. I didn't come here expecting to start a new life. I only wanted safety for her. A little hope. He nodded, eyes still on the horizon. Then that's where we start. Safety. Hope. The rest can take its time. Eleanor turned to him. Why did you really step forward, Samuel? He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady. Because I've known loneliness long enough to recognize it in someone else. And because I couldn't stand seeing a good woman made small by other people's blindness. Her eyes burned. You make it sound simple. He smiled slightly. It is. Kindness usually is. They stood there for a while, saying nothing. The night stretched around them, soft and endless. A wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere inside, Lily murmured in her sleep. Eleanor took a deep breath, the scent of pine and earth filling her lungs. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was bracing for something bad. She felt still. Thank you, she whispered. He looked at her then, his gaze unwavering. You don't owe me thanks. Just promise me one thing. What's that? Don't let them make you think you were ever unworthy of being chosen. Her breath caught. She turned away, blinking hard. That's a hard thing to unlearn. Then we'll work on it, he said simply. She smiled then, small but genuine. The stars glittered above them, and in their quiet glow, something fragile but certain began to take root between them. Not romance, not yet, but respect, understanding, and the faint, steady pulse of trust. From inside the house came Lily's drowsy voice, calling out softly, Mama, we got a home now, don't we? Eleanor's lips trembled, but her voice was steady when she answered, Yes, sweetheart. We do. Samuel smiled at that, tipping his hat against the night. The ranch, the stars, the silence, it all felt like a promise neither of them needed to speak aloud. And as the moon rose over the valley, Eleanor Grace, the bride no one had claimed, realized that what she had been waiting for all along was never someone to save her, only someone willing to stand beside her while she saved herself.